When you're a leader, you're often faced with unenviable decisions. It's sometimes a game of would you rather. Now, if my kids were asking, they would probably ask me something like, Dad, would you rather have paper cuts on the soles of your feet that never heal or an eyelash permanently stuck on your eye? No thanks, guys. I think I'll pass. But in leadership, there is no pass. Would you rather keep an overwhelmed supervisor in her position, or would you rather have a supervisor vacancy at a house that's already really struggling? Would you rather get relief on staffing ratio faster but risk throwing a new hire in before they're ready? Or would you rather take your time onboarding them but risk burning out more of your long-tenured staff? Hello, Difference Maker, and welcome to IDD Leader, the podcast that's all about helping human service organizations retain and grow their workforce using behavioral science. I am your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. Today, we're talking about 4 of the hardest decisions leaders face when it comes to staffing and retention. This might get a little messy because these decisions don't have easy answers. But for this episode, I want to sit with you in the mess for a few minutes and then point to some wisdom based on behavioral science and based on real situations that I've been part of. Oh, and hopefully I can add a little bit of humor in the mix as well, so that you're not crying into your coffee. Well, let's just get right into the first situation. Dilemma number 1, relief versus retention. I already alluded to this earlier, but here's the question. Do I slow down onboarding or get warm bodies on the floor ASAP? You finally got new hires. Congrats! Now the team wants to throw them into full shifts like yesterday. But you know that even though they've made it through the required trainings, they're probably not fully ready yet. So throwing them into the fire may just turn them into smoke. Have you been there with this decision before? Maybe you're facing it on a very regular basis at your organization. I've seen this firsthand over and over again. One time I was talking with a DSP who several months prior to my conversation had found herself in a group home on night shift alone at the end of her very first week on the job. She didn't tell me if she literally called her mom crying on the phone, but what she did tell me is she quit that job with that provider as fast as she possibly could. Why? Because she was in way over her head way too quickly. Gosh, it is so tempting to put people in there as fast as possible because the organization needs it. Because we might be facing decisions like, well, do we have to turn people away or break ratio to make this happen? Or do we just throw someone in as quick as possible? Now, what happens is this. When people don't feel competent, they usually disengage very, very quickly. And so it's kind of a trap because we might get quick relief for the team now, but it usually and very frequently leads to turnover within a few weeks or maybe a couple months. So the reason it's a trap is because that initial relief can feel very substantial and can be very motivating in the moment. But really, it ends up being more of a mirage. So all we're really doing is giving our team short-term relief, but we're exchanging it for long-term pain. It's just so easy to pick the option of put them in there a little quicker than they're ready, and we'll just kind of hope it works. And for any of the long timers that have been in this field a while, at many organizations, that's kind of the status quo. It's just sink or swim, but you're going to be in the deep end either way. Yes, that can weed out people quickly in a way that, I guess you could put a positive spin on that. But fundamentally, it's pretty flawed because potentially good staff often just move on very quickly. They're looking for an organization that will value them and will make sure that they're fully up to speed before they're just completely thrown in there. So then that begs the question of, okay, there kind of seems to be a pretty clear option on this one, but how do you break the cycle? Well, let's just start with this. Get really honest with your team. I hope this is the norm at your organization, but in case it's not, I strongly suggest it. Be really honest. Explain the vicious cycle to your team. They're already experiencing it. And then tell all of them, not just your leaders or not even just your frontline supervisors, but even just your DSPs, all of your staff. Explain to them that you want to break this cycle so that everyone gets relief. And truth be told, in that conversation, you might need to even apologize for those that maybe did get just thrust in way too fast. They weren't ready, and it was a rough experience for them. It's not a bad thing to, as a leader, to apologize and say, I'm sorry that was your experience. I'm sorry that was how we handled things, or maybe it was leaders before you that handled it that way. Regardless, an apology can go a long way. So once you've then gotten really honest with your team, the next thing is commit to quality, not necessarily speedy onboarding and training. So commit to quality onboarding and training. You have to make a plan to get through at least, I would say, 3 cycles of new hires with a new pattern. Yes, you'll probably have to get all hands on deck to make that a reality. But if you commit to it, and in the process, you keep communicating, keep that honest, open dialogue with your frontline staff, frontline supervisors. And then you want to make sure that you're giving them as much support as you can while you know that they're short-staffed. So you've gotten honest with your team, you've committed to quality onboarding and training. Then thirdly, get creative on how to solve the immediate staff shortage problem. The moment that you stop giving yourself or giving your team the option to throw new hires into the mix too quickly, creativity will start to flow. Now, you may have to roll up your sleeves. Quite literally, you or other higher level leaders might have to roll up their sleeves and lend a helping hand a little bit and for a little while to make this thing work. But there could be other creative solutions, maybe using a temp agency, even if that's not the long-term plan, but just using it for a 2 or 3 month period of time to be able to really properly onboard the new hires. But whatever your creative solutions you come up with, don't veer from the course. And then lastly, assess the results and keep making course corrections as needed. You don't want to quit this idea too quickly. Keep providing as much support as needed in the immediate while you're building a process for new staff who will be much more likely to stick around for longer. And as they see, both your experienced staff and your new staff, as they see that you're invested in their success, they will probably hang with you in this process. Now we'll go on to the next supervisor dilemma, or the next dilemma that deals with supervisors. But before we do, I just want to say I go more in depth in onboarding and orientation suggestions in several other episodes. But if you want to hear specifically how one provider created an outstanding experience for their new hires, check out episode 24 about Vocational Training Center in Fargo, North Dakota, and I will put that also in the show notes. Episode 24. All right, the next dilemma is this. Do I remove a struggling supervisor and cause short-term chaos, or keep investing and draining everyone's energy? So here you go. Here's the scenario. You've got a supervisor who they check all the boxes, but they constantly need hand-holding. They've got a lot more fires on their watch than other supervisors do. They have more staff leaving. And meanwhile, your best managers are spending like half their week cleaning up after this supervisor. How many times have you had this thought cross your mind? This one supervisor takes up like 80% of my time. Or maybe if that's not your role, maybe that's a program manager who's reporting to you. And all you keep hearing about is how they keep dealing with that one supervisor. Not that they're toxic or that they're a bad person. They're just not really ready for that level of responsibility. But there's no backup. There's no other great option. And especially if that is at a struggling house or a struggling program, the idea of just pulling that person out and creating that leadership vacuum, yikes, that is not a great scenario either. I seriously feel your pain. I have on multiple occasions left people in positions that they really weren't best suited for simply because I didn't have a better plan or better option. Unfortunately, in pretty much all of those scenarios, that was the wrong call because the cycle just continued. And it wasn't until I finally put my foot down and said, listen, that person has to go. They need to be in a better situation or better role for them, that then we were actually able to get to some real solutions. But it hurt. It hurt in the short term, and it was hard to do, but it was really worth it. What often happens is that there's this sunk cost fallacy, that we've invested so much time, so much energy into the supervisor. They're just about to turn the corner and become better, and suddenly the fires are going to stop. So we shouldn't just give up on them, either, because of all the time we've already invested. The solution's just around the corner, or out of just a compassionate heart. Most of us in this field are in it because we're compassionate people. But either way, it is, in fact, really, it's a fallacy. And what we need to focus on instead is the opportunity cost. That every hour that we spend propping up that one supervisor, or someone on our team is spent propping them up, that's an hour not spent supporting 10 other supervisors who could really use it. The other thing that's happening on the supervisor's end is they're actually kind of getting, the behavioral term for it's reinforced, or you could say rewarded. They're getting rewarded for struggling because they're getting all this attention, all this help. And holding their hand has probably led to some enabling in the relationship. But okay, so how do we get out of the mess? What should we do instead? Well, first, I would say this. You want to quickly figure out, can this person actually learn the necessary skills with training, feedback, and with rewards? A quick way to cut to the chase is, you can look this up on Google. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put a link to it on the show notes. But a really smart person came up with something called the Performance Diagnostic Checklist, the Human Services Edition. And I should have written down their name. I did not do that. But it's a quick checklist you can use to assess, like, will training fix this? If so, what kinds of training, or is there something deeper going on here? So if the answer seems to be yes, that this person really could learn the skills, and I'm not talking about 4 years from now, but they really could learn the skills and learn them kind of quickly, then by all means, yes, invest. But set a clear timeline and clear benchmarks. You do not want the hamster wheel to just keep spinning. Oh, it will be so painful if you do, to you and to everyone on the team. If it does not seem like that's going to be the right fit, they're not in the right role, or sometimes we talk about it's not the right person in the right seat on the bus, then you can plan a compassionate off-ramp. And then you'll need to create a backup bridge plan. This is kind of like the quarterback situation at some NFL franchises for the last 10 years, just going from bridge quarterback to bridge quarterback. You want to have some kind of a bridge plan to get you through to when you really get a solid supervisor in there. So if that's the rest of your team's covering more for a temporary time frame, or if it's some other solution, but you'll need a plan for that. And one thing, if you need to just keep telling yourself something, or if you need to have a line for someone that this is really more of a kind of a closed door statement, but we're not running a supervisor daycare, just, you might have to tell that to someone or tell that to yourself. I also recognize that with this one, you may find yourself or one of your leaders, they just are struggling to pinpoint what's wrong with this supervisor. Like they're doing enough right, but there's just something's not quite, it's not going as well as it could be. And a couple years ago, I actually created a resource called Direct Report with Ongoing Problems Solved. It has a cheesy acronym, DROPS. Anyhow, it's a tool that's designed, if you have a supervisor where the problem feels like a squirrel, you just can't nail it down, it's always moving around, then there's a worksheet that I created. It will walk you through kind of how to identify what's going on, what the remedy should be, and it will help you pinpoint that. And then at that point, you can decide if you need to create an off-ramp for that supervisor, or if there's another option. Maybe training really could be the solution, possibly. Anyhow, I'm happy to share a free copy with you. It's not posted on IDD Leader's website. It's not even really completely polished or branded or anything like that. But listen, if you're in this situation, I just want to help you out. So you could jump on the iddleader.com contact page. Just give me a shout out. Let me know that you want a copy of Drops, or you could just call it the performance worksheet. Whatever you do, whatever you call it, rather, I think I'll know what you mean. Just let me know. I'll be happy to email it directly to you. because that can be a miserable place to be in. And been there, done that. Thankfully, hopefully getting wiser. I think I've been able to handle it a lot better in the last number of years than I did longer ago. All right, dilemma number 4. Do I promote a great employee who seems like they might not quite be ready, or do I try to hire from the outside when I have no idea how long that's going to take or how good they will actually be? Boy, have I seen this scenario. You've got a rock star DSP. They're respected, they're reliable, and they're great with the individuals they serve. Maybe they're even asking for more. Maybe they aren't. But either way, they've never supervised anyone, and part of you just thinks, man, that might not be the best fit for them. Well, I've seen this one flop, actually on both sides of this equation. Whether it's the would you rather promote them when they're not ready, or would you rather, wait and hire from the outside. I've seen outside hires backfire so many times because they present great in the interview and they've got some experience in the field, maybe even checking the references, but there's just not. It's so different when you don't know what you're going to get hiring from the outside. Not that that's always bad. Sometimes it's great. And for any of us that ever got hired from the outside, we're glad someone gave us a shot. But then there's the hiring from the inside. If they really maybe don't quite have the requisite skills, then it's kind of like rolling the dice. You're probably setting yourself up for dilemma 2 to happen, where they're going to be a supervisor needing a lot of extra support. Hopefully, if you have a very good mentoring program for your new supervisors, if you've got a great onboarding process, that might actually alleviate some of that. You might be able to bump people up pretty quickly. But I actually have a different and I think better solution that I'd suggest to you. The solution really would be to create a leadership pipeline. Now, I talk about this more at length in other episodes, but if you can have some kind of a lead role or some type of test pilot position where that person can take on small pieces of leadership without the full-on role responsibilities that come with it, so they're getting some of the responsibilities but not all of it, and then you can kind of give them feedback, maybe not you personally, but if you create this as a process that happens in your organization with your teams, they get feedback along the way of how they're doing, what could use improvement, and they get a chance to kind of stretch their wings a little bit, but with some protection. And what that does is that helps avoid the situation where good staff that do not equal good supervisors getting promoted prematurely. If we're honest with ourselves, it's a different skill set. I mean, we know this. It's just that sometimes the pain of now and the pain of that leadership vacuum can be so great. But let's just be real. It's a different skill set. Yes, they need all the skills of that direct support professional, but they also need the skills of how to manage people, how to minimize drama, how to have hard conversations with staff, not just with their own supervisor or something to that effect. And the other thing on this is that when you have a leadership pipeline that you're in place, I mean, it can be ideally fairly formalized, but even if it's somewhat informal, but you've got these places for people to try out certain aspects of leadership, then it's kind of like you're offering them training wheels. And I've mentioned this word before, but mentoring goes a long way. Someone that's in that spot where they're sort of getting in that lead role, pair them up with a mentor and listen to what that mentor says about the person. Are they ready or not? They'll probably have a better sense than maybe someone higher up or someone in HR, but their mentor will probably know. And then the last thing on this is, as someone is in a spot with those training wheels or supervisor in training position or whatever it is, you want to celebrate their effort, not just the results, but you want to give lots and lots of feedback along the way. That's how they're going to learn how to get better, especially when the stakes are lower. All right, our final dilemma. Here it is. Do I hold the line on expectations, or should I loosen the rules or policies just a little bit to help keep staff? Now, I know that feels like a really obvious answer. And certainly if we're talking health and safety standards, yeah, there shouldn't really be any wiggle room on that. But how about something like your organization's call-off policy? What do you do when you've got a staff who is actually a really great staff, but they just are kind of pushing out on the number of call-offs. Like when they're there, they're great, but they call off kind of a lot. And it's starting to push that policy. Do you just tell them that's it? This, shape up or ship out? And then you've just created more turnover? Or do you try to kind of instruct your supervisors to stay a little bit more loose on that? What if it's more of I don't know, there's just a lot of different situations it could be. It could be punctuality. It could be that they are really great with their case notes, but they're not quite as strong with their people skills, or vice versa. They're great with the direct care. They're great with their people skills, but they're not turning in the paperwork on time, or they've got too many, errors of some kind. Over and over again, you and your organization have to decide what are the standards that are minimum standards that we're keeping. But then it gets beyond that, right? What are we going to do about people that are sort of pushing that line a little bit? Well, here's what I'd have to say about this. I don't know if you ever played the original Super Mario Brothers for the original Nintendo system, but on that game, when you move from left to right, you can't go back. Like the screen keeps moving forward. And then there's some levels, especially on some of the other Marios, where the screen would keep moving you along whether or not you were trying to move your character along. And if you waited too long, that screen would catch up to you, you would lose your life. And you couldn't really rush ahead too far as well with those levels. Anyhow, Mario Brothers aside, what you want to have is you want to have very clear minimum standards. Like this you have to meet this standard just for minimum acceptable, for our policy to be intact. The standard is the standard, just like Mike Tomlin says. But so you want clarity on the bottom, but then you also want rewards and reinforcement for people that are going above and beyond, or that are moving in the right direction. And this can be a challenge to, it can be a little bit of a challenge to get this going, but once it's going, it's actually not hard at all. You can do this with some kind of reward system where people are earning points for meeting just slightly above the minimum expectations, and then the further above they go, the more points that they can earn, and they could turn those in for, like swag or gift cards or things like this. That's more formalized. A more informal way could be just throwing some kind of a party, or buying some kind of simple little treat for people on Fridays if such and such was accomplished by the whole team, or better yet, each individual that accomplishes something gets access to whatever the reward is. Here's the thing, you want to tie their individual effort or lack thereof to their reward or their consequence. So you don't just have a minimum standard. If you think about this on a factory setting, it kind of gets a little clearer. If you need to do 80 units a day to not get fired, and the high performers can easily do 100 units a day or more, if there's no incentive for your staff to be doing 100 units, then they're going to probably just be coming in the low 80s. They don't want to necessarily get fired, but they're just barely staying above that minimum standard. And so by adding in this piece about rewards, you can start to move people from just barely, getting above the minimum standard to really starting to see what they can produce and what they can give in their workplace. Their discretionary effort goes up. And you want to have that be as much individualized as possible. Sometimes team rewards can be good too, but as much individualized as possible, because that's really how to maximize performance and maximize buy-in. Because, hey, I'm not tied to what Joe or what Shay are doing. I can just do what I'm doing, and I'm going to get the rewards that I earn for myself. And so that really would be, I guess, my best recommendation for how do you handle the situation of holding the line on expectations versus loosening up on staff. One other quick note on that, if you have dumb rules or dumb policies, then just do whatever you need to do to change them, or get in touch with the decision makers who can change them, because that's the last thing you need, is for some stupid policy to be causing people extra stress or causing unnecessary turnover. So didn't mention that sooner, but thought I should throw it in here at the end. Okay, well, to wrap up, let me just kind of summarize. We all get stuck in some tough spots sometimes, and there often are no perfect answers. But the good news is you don't have to just guess on what the best trade-off is. You can make an informed, measured, intentional decision. In fact, I encourage you to do so. Your team and everyone will benefit from you doing that. And that thankfully, behavioral science can help lead to the least bad choices in these kinds of moments, and hopefully the best possible outcome as well. So, if things have been really hard lately, here's your action step. You ready? First, I want to say this. You're not alone. I may not know you personally, but I see the struggle that so many IDD leaders are facing. And so one of the best things you can do, this is the action item I'm encouraging you with, is if you've been having just quite a week or a month or a year or whatever, reach out to another leader who's in the trenches. Let them know you're thinking of them. And in fact, if you forward this episode to them with a quick message about how you're thinking about them too, that would probably make their day. And it helps them know they're not crazy, they're not alone, and yeah, this can get really hard sometimes. Listen, you want to create a retention-focused culture, I've got a free resource for you. It's the top 10 questions and answers to help you solve DSP turnover. You can download it for free at iddleader.com/top10. That's spelled out TOPTEN. My hats are always off to you because I think you're some of the heroes in this world, difference makers. But let me just tell you, until next time, here's to you, difference maker. Keep up the amazing work.